A monkey enters a temple during a prayer. What it offers will leave you in tears. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the ancient temple nestled deep within the Indian jungle. Its towering spires, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, stood as silent witnesses to countless prayers whispered into the sacred air. Incense wafted through the open halls, blending with the earthy aroma of the surrounding forest. The faint chanting of devotees echoed softly, harmonizing with the rhythmic chirping of crickets. Inside the temple, a serene atmosphere enveloped the worshippers. They knelt on the cool marble floor, their eyes closed in reverence, hands pressed together in silent devotion. The priest, clad in saffron robes, stood at the altar, his voice steady as he recited the sacred verses. The golden deity, adorned with marigolds and shimmering oil lamps, seemed to glow with a divine presence. Suddenly, a ripple of unease swept through the congregation. At first, it was barely noticeable, a soft rustling outside the temple gates, almost indistinguishable from the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. But the sound grew louder, more deliberate. The priest paused mid-verse, his brows knitting together in confusion. All eyes turned toward the grand entrance, where the massive wooden doors stood ajar, and then it happened. A small figure darted into the temple, its movements swift yet cautious. It was a monkey, its glossy fur catching the dim light of the oil lamps. The animal paused just inside the entrance, its intelligent eyes scanning the room with an expression that was almost human. Gasps of surprise rippled through the crowd. Some worshippers shuffled back, startled by the unexpected visitor. Others whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The monkey moved forward, clutching something tightly in its tiny hands. It was an unusual sight, even for a place where animals often roamed freely. This was no ordinary intrusion. The creature seemed purposeful, almost reverent as it approached the altar. Its movements were deliberate, as though it understood the sacredness of the space it had entered. The priest stepped forward cautiously, his hand raised to calm the murmuring crowd. His voice, though measured, carried a note of awe. "Be still," he said. "Let us see what this creature seeks." The monkey stopped a few feet from the altar, its gaze fixed on the deity. Slowly it extended its hands, revealing its offering, a single, wilted flower. The petals, though faded, were arranged with care as if plucked with intention. A collective gasp filled the room. The simplicity of the gesture struck a chord deep within the hearts of all who watched, but there was more. As the monkey laid the flower at the foot of the altar, it did something no one expected. It bowed. A deep, deliberate bow, its head nearly touching the marble floor. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the priest, who had witnessed countless rituals, stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. And then the monkey looked up. Its eyes glistened, not with fear, but with an emotion so raw, so poignant, that it left the onlookers spellbound. Was it sorrow? Gratitude? A silent plea? No one could say for certain, but the weight of that gaze was undeniable. It was as though the creature carried the burden of a story untold, a story that demanded to be heard. The priest knelt, his movements slow and deliberate, as not to startle the animal. "Why have you come, little one?" he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. The monkey tilted its head as if understanding the question. Then, to everyone's astonishment, it reached out and touched the priest's hand. A fleeting gesture, yet imbued with profound meaning. Before anyone could react, the monkey turned and scampered toward the temple's exit. It paused briefly at the threshold, casting one last glance back at the altar, and then disappeared into the gathering dusk. For a moment, the temple remained silent, the air heavy with a sense of the extraordinary. It was the priest who finally broke the spell. "This," he said, his voice trembling, "was no ordinary visitor. The gods often choose unlikely messengers. We must seek to understand the meaning behind this." The worshippers, still reeling from what they had witnessed, began to murmur among themselves. What could have driven the monkey to such an act? Was it guided by divine will, or was there a deeper, more earthly pain hidden within its offering? Questions swirled like the smoke of the incense, unanswered yet impossible to ignore. Unbeknownst to the worshippers, The monkey's journey was far from over. Deep in the heart of the jungle, beneath the canopy of ancient trees, lay the truth behind its actions. A truth that would unravel a tale of loss, love, and resilience. For this was no ordinary animal. This was a soul on a mission, driven by forces unseen, its path intertwined with the lives of those it had touched. Little did they know, the flower it had offered held a story that would soon leave them and the world in tears. As the monkey vanished into the dense foliage, the priest and the worshippers stood frozen, their thoughts tethered to the enigmatic encounter. Whispers of divine intervention spread like wildfire through the village. Some called it a blessing, others a warning. But for the priest, the monkey's tearful gaze and the wilted flower spoke of something more, a silent cry for help. Far away from the temple, under the sprawling canopy of the jungle, the monkey moved with urgency. The golden hues of the evening had faded into the silvery light of the moon. The forest was alive with nocturnal sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a leopard, the rhythmic chorus of crickets. But the monkey seemed unbothered, its focus unyielding. In its small hands it carried something else now, a bundle wrapped in leaves, tied together with strands of grass. It clutched the bundle tightly, as if it held the weight of its world. The animal darted through the underbrush, its agile movements betraying an undercurrent of desperation. The jungle opened to a small clearing, illuminated by the moonlight. In the center stood a colossal banyan tree, its roots sprawling like the veins of the earth. Beneath the tree lay a mound of soft leaves, arranged with care. The monkey approached the mound, its breath labored, and gently placed the bundle on top. It hesitated, its trembling hands lingering over the leaves before finally stepping back. The bundle stirred. A faint sound emerged, a weak, pitiful cry. The monkey let out a low whimper in response, its body trembling. Slowly, the leaves fell away to reveal a baby monkey, frail and visibly ill. Its tiny frame shivered in the cool night air, its eyes half closed with exhaustion. The mother monkey, now clear from its desperate movements, wrapped her arms around her child, nuzzling it gently. Her eyes, the same ones that had captivated the temple worshippers, brimmed with tears once more. This was her secret, the pain she had carried silently into the sacred space. The child's labored breaths filled the stillness of the clearing, each one a fragile testament to its fight for life. The mother looked up toward the sky, her face etched with a mixture of anguish and determination. She had done everything she could, scouring the jungle for food, sheltering her baby from predators, even braving the human world in search of something greater. But time was slipping away, and hope was dwindling. Back at the temple, the priest sat in quiet contemplation. The image of the monkey's offering lingered in his mind, a puzzle demanding to be solved. He couldn't shake the feeling that the creature's actions were purposeful, a message meant for him. Driven by an inexplicable pull, he decided to act. "Ram," he called to the young acolyte who served as his assistant. "We need to find that monkey." Ram looked up, startled. "The monkey, Guruji, but it's just an animal. It's gone back into the jungle." The priest shook his head. "No ordinary animal would offer a flower with such intention. Something deeper is at play. Fetch a lantern and some food. We leave at once." The villagers, overhearing the priest's plan, gathered around. "Guruji, the jungle is dangerous at night. What if something happens to you?" The priest's gaze was steady. "If the gods have sent this creature, then its plight is a part of their will. We must trust in their protection." And so, with only a lantern to light their path and a bag of offerings as provisions, the priest and Ram ventured into the jungle. The forest loomed around them, its shadows stretching like phantom hands. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made Ram flinch, but the priest walked with quiet determination, following the faint trail of crushed foliage left by the monkey. It was nearing midnight when the priest and Ram stumbled upon the clearing. The banyan tree stood tall, its ancient roots casting eerie shadows under the moonlight. At first they saw nothing, just the empty expanse of leaves and roots. But then a faint sound reached their ears. A whimper. The priest motioned for silence, his hand raised to still Ram's nervous whispers. He stepped forward cautiously, the lantern casting a warm glow that pierced the darkness. And then he saw them. The mother monkey was hunched over her child, her arms forming a protective cocoon. Her head snapped up at the intruding light, her eyes wide with fear. She let out a sharp screech, baring her teeth in warning. "Stay back," the priest murmured to Ram, his voice low and soothing. He set the lantern down and crouched, keeping his movements slow and unthreatening. From his bag he pulled out a banana, peeling it halfway before placing it on the ground. He retreated slightly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. The mother monkey hesitated, her gaze darting between the priest and her child. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, but exhaustion and desperation rooted her in place. Finally, she reached out cautiously, grabbing the banana and retreating to her child's side. The priest's heart ached as he observed the baby monkey. It was clearly unwell, its breathing shallow, its tiny frame too weak to move. He turned to Ram. "We need to help them," he said quietly. "But how, Guruji?" Ram whispered, his voice tinged with both fear and awe. "It's a wild animal. What if it attacks us?" The priest shook his head. "Fear has no place here. The gods brought us to this moment. We must act with compassion." He reached into his bag once more, this time pulling out a small vial of herbal medicine he always carried. "Ram, bring some water from the stream," he instructed. "We'll start by hydrating the little one." Ram hesitated but obeyed, disappearing into the darkness. The priest turned back to the mother monkey, his voice gentle. "I mean you no harm," he said softly. "Let me help." Over the next hour, a fragile trust began to form. The mother monkey, though wary, allowed the priest to approach. Together they worked to ease the baby's suffering, hydrating it drop by drop, offering small morsels of food and applying the herbal salve to its frail body. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, the baby monkey stirred slightly, its eyes fluttering open for the first time in hours. A soft sound escaped its lips, a faint but hopeful cry. The mother monkey let out a low, rumbling call, nuzzling her child with renewed vigor. The priest sat back, exhaustion etched into his features, yet his heart swelled with relief. "It will survive," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "The gods are kind." The mother monkey turned to him, her eyes locking onto his. There was no language to bridge the gap between them, yet in that moment, none was needed. Her gaze spoke of gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed, however briefly, between two worlds. The jungle woke slowly, the first rays of sunlight spilling through the dense canopy, painting the forest floor in hues of gold and green. The priest and Ram, exhausted but resolute, watched as the baby monkey began to stir. Its tiny hands twitched, clutching weakly at its mother's fur. The mother monkey, still cautious, alternated between nuzzling her child and casting wary glances at the humans who had intervened. "She trusts us now," the priest said softly, watching the scene unfold. "But this is only the beginning. The baby needs more care, more than what the jungle alone can provide." Ram, who had been silent for much of the night, finally spoke. "Guruji, do you think she understands what we're trying to do, that we're helping?" The priest smiled faintly. "Trust is a universal language, Ram. Actions speak louder than words, even to those who cannot understand our speech." The priest moved cautiously toward the mother monkey, holding out a fresh banana. She eyed him warily, but did not retreat this time. Slowly, she took the fruit, her movements hesitant but less frantic than before. It was a silent acknowledgement, a fragile truce between the wild and the human. "We can't leave them here," the priest said, his voice laced with determination. "The baby is still too weak. We need to take them somewhere safe." Ram's eyes widened. "You mean, bring them back to the temple? But Guruji, what if she panics? What if she attacks?" The priest knelt, his gaze steady. "The gods brought us to them for a reason. We can't abandon them now. If we act with care and patience, she will follow." The priest carefully placed a small blanket on the ground, folding it into a makeshift sling. He gestured gently toward the mother monkey, showing her his intentions. She growled softly, pulling her baby closer, her eyes darting between the humans and the jungle beyond. "I know you're afraid," the priest murmured, "but this is the only way." He backed away slightly, giving her space, and waited. The mother monkey hesitated, her instincts torn between protecting her child and the strange pull of these humans who had shown her kindness. After what felt like an eternity, she made her decision. Clutching her baby tightly, she climbed onto the sling, her movements deliberate and careful. Ram let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "She's actually trusting us," the priest nodded, lifting the sling slowly to avoid startling her. "This is no ordinary creature, Ram. There's a wisdom in her eyes, a knowing that defies explanation." With the mother monkey secured, the priest and Ram began their trek back to the temple. The jungle seemed both alive and watchful, every rustle of leaves a reminder of its dangers. The mother monkey clung tightly to her baby, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. Despite her exhaustion, she remained vigilant, ready to protect her child at all costs. By the time they reached the temple, the sun was high in the sky, its warmth casting away the chill of the night. A small crowd had gathered, their murmurs growing louder as the priest emerged from the forest, carrying the mother monkey and her baby. The sight was extraordinary. A revered holy man, his saffron robe stained with dirt, cradling a wild animal as if it were a sacred offering. The villagers exchanged whispers, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Guruji," one of the elders said, stepping forward, "what is the meaning of this? Why have you brought these creatures to the temple?" The priest set the sling down gently and turned to the crowd. "This mother came to us last night during prayer bearing an offering of her own. It was not a coincidence. She sought our help, and it is our duty to provide it." Some nodded in agreement, moved by the priest's words, while others looked skeptical. "But Guruji," a young woman asked, "what can we do for them? They belong to the jungle." The priest's gaze was unwavering. "Compassion knows no boundaries. If we can heal this child, we will not only save a life but fulfill the will of the divine." Over the following days, the temple became a sanctuary, not only for the villagers, but for the mother monkey and her baby. The priest and Ram worked tirelessly, preparing herbal remedies, feeding the pair, and ensuring they were safe. The villagers, initially hesitant, began to soften as they witnessed the priest's unwavering dedication. The mother monkey, though still cautious, began to show signs of trust. She allowed the priest to clean the baby's wounds and accepted food directly from his hands. Ram, initially fearful, found himself marveling at the creature's intelligence and resilience. "She watches everything we do," Ram said one afternoon, observing the mother monkey. "It's like she's trying to understand us." The priest smiled. "And we are trying to understand her. In that we are no different." The baby monkey's health improved gradually. Its once labored breaths became steady, its frail body gaining strength. The villagers, inspired by the priest's example, began to bring offerings of fruit and herbs, their initial skepticism replaced by a quiet reverence for the animals. But the bond went deeper than mere care. The mother monkey, in her own way, began to reciprocate the kindness she received. She stayed close to the priest, her sharp eyes observing his every move. On more than one occasion, she ventured into the temple courtyard, her child nestled in her arms as if paying silent homage to the place that had given them refuge. One afternoon, as the priest prepared offerings for the evening prayer, a commotion erupted in the village. A group of men arrived carrying crude nets and weapons. They were hunters, their expressions hard and their intentions clear. "We heard you've been keeping a monkey here," their leader said, his voice gruff. "Those creatures don't belong in temples. Hand it over." The villagers stood frozen, their fear palpable. The priest stepped forward, his face calm but his voice firm. "This temple is a sanctuary. No harm will come to the creatures under its roof." The hunter sneered. "Sanctuary or not, that monkey is worth a fortune. We're taking it." Before anyone could react, a piercing screech echoed through the courtyard. The mother monkey appeared, her child clinging to her chest. She bared her teeth, her body tense and ready to defend her baby. The hunters froze, startled by the sudden appearance. The priest seized the moment. "Look at her," he said, his voice rising. "She is a mother protecting her child, just as any of you would. What right do we have to take that from her?" The crowd murmured in agreement, their fear giving way to solidarity. The hunters, outnumbered and unnerved by the intensity of the priest's words, retreated with curses under their breath. As they disappeared into the jungle, the mother monkey let out a low, rumbling call. She turned to the priest, her eyes locking onto his. In that moment, the bond between them deepened, a silent acknowledgement of trust and gratitude. As days turned into weeks, the temple courtyard became a place of healing, transformation, and quiet miracles. The baby monkey, now noticeably stronger, had begun to explore its surroundings, its tiny hands grasping at flowers and leaves. The mother, though still cautious, allowed herself moments of rest under the banyan tree, her trust in the priest and villagers growing deeper, but the peace was not to last. One evening, as the villagers gathered for the temple's evening prayers, dark clouds rolled across the horizon, casting an ominous shadow over the jungle. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of rain and something more, an electric tension that made the hairs on the back of one's neck stand on end. The priest looked up at the sky, his face grim. "A storm is coming," he murmured to Ram, "a fierce one." As the first drops of rain fell, the mother monkey, sensing danger, gathered her baby and retreated to the temple's inner sanctum. The villagers followed suit, seeking shelter within the sturdy walls of the temple. The wind lashed against the building, rattling the wooden doors and sending loose leaves spiraling into the air. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the jungle, a sound so jarring it silenced even the storm. The villagers exchanged fearful glances. "What was that?" Ram whispered, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. The priest's expression darkened. "Something is not right. Stay here. I will investigate." The mother monkey let out a sharp cry, clinging to the priest's robes as if to stop him. He knelt beside her, his voice calm and soothing. "I'll be back, I promise." The priest and a few brave villagers ventured into the storm, their lanterns casting flickering light on the rain-soaked ground. The sound of the storm was deafening, each crash of thunder reverberating through the jungle. They followed the source of the earlier noise, their path illuminated by occasional flashes of lightning. What they found made their blood run cold. A massive tree had fallen, its roots upturned, and its trunk crushing a section of the jungle. Beneath its splintered branches lay the remains of a leopard, its powerful body pinned under the weight of the tree. But the scene told a deeper story. The leopard had not died instantly. Its claw marks raked the ground, and nearby the torn remnants of a bird's nest hinted at a desperate struggle for survival. "The storm spared nothing," one villager whispered, his voice heavy with sorrow. But the priest's eyes were fixed on something else, a set of small paw prints leading away from the scene. "For the leopard was not alone," he said, his voice tense. "It had cubs." A distant plaintive cry cut through the noise of the storm. The priest's heart quickened. "We must follow it." The search led them to a small hollow at the base of a tree. Inside, two tiny leopard cubs huddled together, their spotted coats soaked with rain. They cried out weakly, their voices filled with fear and hunger. The priest crouched down, extending his hand slowly. The cubs flinched, their instincts warning them against the unfamiliar. "These creatures are orphans now," the priest said, his voice thick with emotion. "They won't survive the night without help." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. "Guruji," one of them said hesitantly, "leopards are predators. If we bring them back to the temple, it could put everyone at risk." The priest's gaze was unwavering. "Compassion is not selective. If we only help those who pose no threat, we fail the god's test of kindness." With great care, he wrapped the cubs in a shawl, shielding them from the rain. "We'll keep them separate from the others," he promised, "but we will not abandon them." The arrival of the leopard cubs created ripples of tension within the temple. The mother monkey, sensing their presence, became agitated, her protective instincts flaring. She clutched her baby tightly, her sharp eyes fixed on the room where the cubs were being cared for. "She's scared," Ram said, watching the mother monkey pace back and forth. "She sees them as a threat." The priest nodded. "Her fear is natural, but trust is built through actions, not words." Over the next few days, the priest worked tirelessly to care for both the cubs and the monkeys. He ensured that their paths did not cross, yet he also made a point to demonstrate his unwavering care for all of them. He fed the cubs with milk and gently cleaned their fur, while continuing to nurture the baby monkey with herbal remedies and fresh fruit. Slowly, the tension began to ease. The mother monkey watched from a distance as the priest tended to the cubs, her sharp eyes softening with curiosity. It was as if she was beginning to understand that the cubs, like her own child, were vulnerable and in need of protection. One afternoon, as the priest prepared offerings, a remarkable scene unfolded in the temple courtyard. The baby monkey, now healthy and playful, ventured toward the area where the cubs were resting. The mother monkey let out a warning call, but the baby ignored her, its curiosity outweighing its caution. The cubs, too young to pose a threat, lifted their heads and watched as the baby monkey approached. For a moment there was silence, a fragile pause where instincts and innocence hung in the balance. Then the baby monkey let out a playful squeak and tossed a small fruit toward the cubs. One of the cubs sniffed the offering, then batted it with its paw, eliciting a delighted laugh from the baby monkey. The mother monkey watched, her posture tense but unmoving. Slowly she crept closer, her eyes fixed on the cubs. The priest held his breath, unsure of what would happen next. To everyone's astonishment, the mother monkey crouched beside her baby, her sharp eyes softening as she observed the cubs. She let out a low, rumbling call, not of aggression, but of acknowledgement. The weeks that followed were nothing short of miraculous. The monkeys and the leopard cubs began to coexist, their initial wariness giving way to an unspoken truce. The baby monkey and the cubs often played together under the banyan tree, their laughter and growls blending into a symphony of innocence. The villagers, once skeptical of the priest's decisions, marveled at the harmony that had taken root within the temple. The sight of the mother monkey grooming one of the cubs while her own baby napped beside it became a symbol of the sanctuary's deeper purpose, a place where boundaries dissolved and life flourished against all odds. The temple, now a beacon of compassion and coexistence, had drawn the attention of nearby villages. Word spread of the priest's sanctuary, where predators and prey lived side by side in harmony. Curious visitors arrived daily, bringing offerings and seeking blessings. Some came to witness the miraculous bond between the monkeys and the leopard cubs, a living testament to the power of kindness. But this growing attention brought unintended consequences. One fateful evening, as the villagers prepared for the temple's annual festival, a group of outsiders arrived. They were traders, their clothing adorned with fine silks and their faces marked by shrewd expressions. At first they seemed like ordinary travelers, seeking shelter and offering generous donations. But their true intentions became clear as the night wore on. These animals could fetch a fortune in the city markets, one trader whispered to his companion as they observed the cubs playing in the courtyard. Exotic pets for the wealthy, or better yet, trained performers for the arena. The priest, who overheard their conversation, felt a chill run down his spine. He confronted the traders, his voice steady but firm. "This temple is a sanctuary. These creatures are not for sale." The traders feigned innocence. "Of course, Guruji. We meant no disrespect, but surely the funds could help expand the temple's reach, provide for the villagers." The priest cut them off. "Compassion cannot be traded, nor can the lives under my care. Leave now and do not return." The traders exchanged dark glances but complied, retreating into the night. Yet the priest knew their departure was not the end. He could feel the weight of their greed lingering in the air, like a storm waiting to break. The temple slept uneasily that night. The priest, sensing danger, stayed awake, chanting prayers for protection. The mother monkey and the cubs huddled close, their instincts warning them of the unseen threat. Just before dawn, the stillness was shattered. A group of masked men stormed the temple, their torches casting eerie shadows on the ancient walls. They moved with precision, their nets and ropes targeting the animals. The mother monkey let out a piercing scream, waking the entire temple. She grabbed her baby and scrambled up a pillar, her movements frantic. The cubs, startled and confused, growled weakly, their small bodies too slow to evade capture. The priest rushed into the courtyard, his heart pounding. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the temple. "What you are doing is sacrilege," one of the men sneered. "Step aside, old man. These beasts are worth more than your prayers." But the priest stood his ground, his frail frame unwavering. "These creatures are under divine protection. If you harm them, you will answer to the gods." The men hesitated, their confidence faltering. It was then that the villagers arrived, armed with farming tools and their own resolve. They surrounded the raiders, their faces a mixture of anger and determination. "You'll have to go through us," Ram declared, stepping forward. "These animals are part of our family now." Outnumbered and cornered, the raiders dropped their nets and fled into the jungle, their shouts of frustration fading into the distance. As the villagers celebrated their victory, a sudden cry silenced the crowd. The mother monkey, who had been fighting off one of the raiders, collapsed to the ground. Her baby clung to her, letting out desperate squeals. The priest rushed to her side, his hands trembling. A small wound on her side bled profusely. A blade meant for her child had struck her instead. "No," the priest whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Not after everything." The villagers gathered around, their joy replaced by sorrow. The mother monkey, her strength fading, looked up at the priest. Her eyes, once filled with wariness, now held only trust and gratitude. She placed her baby in his hands, letting out a soft final cry. The priest cradled the tiny creature, his heart breaking. "You gave everything for your child," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We will honor your sacrifice." The mother monkey was laid to rest beneath the banyan tree, her grave marked by flowers and prayers. The villagers, moved by her bravery, vowed to protect the sanctuary and its inhabitants with their lives. The baby monkey, now an orphan, found solace in the priest's care. The leopard cubs, sensing the loss, stayed close to their tiny companion, their bond deepening in the wake of tragedy. The temple became more than a sanctuary. It became a symbol of resilience, compassion, and the unbreakable connections that transcend species. Visitors continued to arrive, not just to see the animals, but to hear the story of the mother monkey who had given her life to protect her child. The tale spread far and wide, inspiring acts of kindness and conservation efforts in neighboring villages. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the priest sat beneath the banyan tree, the baby monkey perched on his shoulder. The leopard cubs played nearby, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. Ram joined him, his face thoughtful. "Guruji," he said, "do you think she knew what she was doing that night? That she was sacrificing herself for her child?" The priest nodded, his gaze fixed on the golden sky. "A mother's love is the purest form of devotion. It transcends fear, pain, even death. In her final moments, she taught us all a lesson the gods themselves would envy." He placed a hand on the baby monkey's tiny head, his voice filled with quiet reverence. "She may be gone, but her spirit lives on, in her child in this sanctuary, and in every act of kindness that follows." As the first stars appeared, the priest closed his eyes, offering a silent prayer. The temple stood as a beacon of hope, its walls echoing with the laughter of animals and the whispers of a story that would never be forgotten.